All right, just for fun, I thought I would go ahead and do another demonstration. And I'm going to use a real high contrast, so I've got a scarlet thread here. This is the quilter's knot. I'm going to make a little cross at the tip of my needle, then wrap the tail around 1, 2, 3 times. Just maybe you could go more or less. And then slide that wrap all the way down to the end of the thread. I'm using a single strand of thread, and it's just looped through the needle. And that allows me to work my way along the thread. Thread longer than 14 inches is always going to be a risk, so keep it in that range. So the thread has come out through the edge of the binding, and then I'm going to start the next stitch right next to it. Come down about 3/8 to 1/4 inch, and then come out through the backing and the binding, the edge of the binding, maybe a thread or 2 of the edge of the binding, and then pull that through, and then start the next stitch right there where that came out by going into the back of the back fabric. So if I matched that thread, you could see it would be an almost invisible stitch. That's the mechanics of it. I'm putting a facing on a quilt, but if you did a binding, it'd be the exact same thing. So I thought maybe I'd talk you through it. The needle I'm using is a straw needle, size 11. Man, the hole is tiny. It's hard to thread, but it's worth it. It just glides through the fabric. And then the thread I'm using the thinnest thread I can find. This is 100 weight silk thread. I like silk thread because it just melts into the fabric. But if you can't find that, a 60 weight cotton would be okay. I don't want to go any thicker than a 50 weight cotton. But if you can find a silk that kind of blends in, that's your goal. When I make my stitch, I'm doing this through the camera lens, so this is kind of weird. I'm going to insert the needle into the back fabric, go about 5 threads over, and then let the needle poke back through the folded edge of my binding. So that makes a stitch that only shows right there. You see that? That's all it is. And so here I'm going to make the next stitch. As I'm coming up through that fabric I'm using for my binding, I'm only catching about 2 threads on the fold. Or at least that's my goal. Yeah, brilliant. Okay, stopping here. Okay, I'm back. I've just threaded my needle. Wasn't too bad. Let's see, where am I? Ooh, not getting too far. Now, if I were doing a binding, I would use some little hair clips, which I'll show you later, to hold the binding in place, and then just move them along as I work. So down in the backing fabric, over 5 threads or so, out through the edge of the binding fabric. So when I go back down in, I'm going down right next to where the thread came out. And that's why the only part that's going to show is the part that goes over that edge. And you see how blending the color of the thread and using an ultra-fine thread really makes those stitches disappear. They're hard to see. Right, here I go. I can't believe I'm doing this by looking into a camera. It's not the easiest thing in the world. And that's all it is. I'm trying to grasp just a tiny bit of the batting, but not too much. I don't want to go all the way through to the front, and that's always a danger. So you're just skimming along the back of the fabric. One thing that's helpful to do is to put if you're using pins, put them in from the back instead of from the front. This will catch your thread, but this won't. And then every few inches, make a loop and go through the loop to make it a little knot. Just keep securing your thread. As I said, I'm working with a single strand, and as I go, I'm working my way down the tail. It gets shorter and shorter, and that means that the wear and tear on the thread by the eye of the needle keeps moving down along that tail as well. So hopefully it won't break on me. And that's it. A couple warnings. This kind of needle has it's almost as sharp in the back as it is in the front, so I will probably switch to wearing a thimble here soon. I wear a leather thimble. It's very comfortable. So let me stop here and I'll show you just a few more things that I like to use when I'm putting a binding on. All right, so this is the thimble I like to use. It's a leather thimble. It's called a Nimble thimble, I think. I think they cost about $8. The magic in them is it's not only leather, but right up here in the tip, it's got a little metal plate, and that's what actually protects your finger. But because it's leather, it's very comfortable to wear. I'll forget I even have it on. Finger cots, which you can find in the drugstore. That's a good way to help grip your needle a little more securely. Yeah, they look kind of funny sitting around. That's been used a bit, but still good. Okay, so that'll help me pull the needle. When I say hair clips, this is what I'm talking about. So when I'm doing a binding, I'll just clip it on the edge to hold the binding in place. I usually run 3 of them at a time. And as I get past one, I'll just move it down. But of course, I know you've got a good stock of these little jobs, so I think they would work just fine too. That's it for binding. If you have any questions, let me know.